What's up, everyone? Monster Master Godzilla here, and I'm back continuing the Indiana Jones-A-Thon, and now I'm ending it. We're about to end it, and we're about to put the Indiana Jones-A-Thon to an end. We're now up to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Now, I just saw it over the weekend in the theaters. So, if you haven't seen it, get off this video. There will be major spoilers in this film. Alright, where do I go from here? Alright, where do I go from this? This one's an awesome comeback. It was a great comeback for Indiana Jones on the big screen. After a really long hiatus since 2008. It was Disney had bought Indiana Jones. When Disney now Disney ends up taking over and making Indiana Jones as a movie, and they were in the works of making Indiana Jones movie for quite a while after the mixed reception from the audience after Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I mean, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was praised by critics, but was mixed reviews from audiences. Now, what can I say about this one? It's called Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Here we have, this one is the final adventure for Indiana Jones. The fifth Indiana Jones movie. For a while, the fifth Indiana Jones movie had been in development hell for quite a while. Until finally, in 2022, in 2021, they finally announced that a fifth Indiana Jones movie was in the works. And they confirmed to be the final adventure for Indiana Jones. And Disney ends up having power of making the movie. And instead of Steven Spielberg, who directed the first four, James Mangold ends up taking over his directing chair. And Steven Spielberg was involved in the film, of course. He's producer. He ended up being producer rather than director. And it turns out Steven Spielberg liked it, even though he didn't direct it. It was the first and only Indiana Jones movie to never be directed by Steven Spielberg. So, now here we go. This one has is very honorable to Raiders of the Lost Ark. It had made several callbacks to the past four adventures. In the beginning, shows that they were in the last years of World War II. In 1944, and they were in a quest finding the dial, which is Archimedes' dial. Found the half of the dial, and Toby Jones was involved in the film, and he was once the friend. And the coolest thing about the beginning is that they end up digitally de-aging Harrison Ford. Yes, for his role of Indiana Jones when he was younger, they end up digitally de-aging him. And Harrison Ford, he's 80 years old right now. I mean, this is the fifth time he's playing Indiana Jones, and this time they confirmed this one's the final time for Harrison Ford to play Indiana Jones. I mean, he's 80 years old, and God knows how much time he has left in this world. So, after they end up battling the Nazis. Mads Mikkelsen plays Jörgen Voller, who is the main villain of the film, and he's the Nazi bad guy, and he was on a quest for power, trying to correct Hitler's mistake. On a quest to correct Hitler's mistake. so he can take over the world with the dial. And so, as the dial of destiny came around, so after that, it makes it difficult to understand in some cases. And so then years later, it took place in 1969 during the Vietnam War. India is now like separated from, and now here you go. And remember how the ending of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where Indy and Marion got married. Well, sadly, they end up splitting up, which that was a big disappointment. And because being that it was set during the Vietnam War, they explained that Mutt Williams, which is Shia LaBeouf's very hated character, not very popular character, got enlisted in the war for Vietnam. But then Mutt ends up dying a hero in this film. He died during the war, and it causes the relationship for Indy but then Indy and Marion's relationship was torn apart after they lost Mutt. Yeah, they actually killed off Mutt Williams, since a lot of audiences hated him. Probably because it felt shoehorned. It felt forced to introduce Indiana Jones' son. And probably because they don't see Indy as being a family man, since he's being an archaeologist. And so they end up meeting up with an old goddaughter. So then Indy about to retire from being a professor and archaeologist. So then the bad guys come back. Jorgen Voller was one of the surviving Nazis of World War II. Yes, that's right, folks. After the fact that they used Russians in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which a lot of people don't appreciate, which I understand they do that for the time being, because World War II is over. So they end up bringing back the Nazis. They end up bringing back the Nazis in this one. And it is explained that they were the leftovers. They were the Nazi leftovers from World War II, who are survivors. Jorgen Voller was a Nazi turned NASA scientist, and he was going by the name Dr. Schmidt as his cover, and he was on his quest for power. So, and then Indy ends up meeting up with an old goddaughter of his, which is nicknamed Wombat, and she is very much the anti-Indy. And then when the Germans came around and caused a massacre, the police end up going after Indy, and he ends up being a wanted man, and he was accused of murder, which he never did. And then Indy ends up meeting up with Sala, an old friend of his, and Sala now moved into New York City. He got a job as a taxi driver. And he now has grandchildren, and it was great to see Sala back for the first time since Last Crusade. And so Sala ends up giving Indy his gear back, and he ends up wishing him luck on his quest. And after dropping him off at the airport, he says, "Bring them hell, Indiana Jones." Which that was a big line that he said in the trailers. And so when Indy ends up finding Wombat, he ends up meeting up with a kid sidekick, which kind of similar to Short Round in this film. So they seem to bring back, they seem to make callbacks to Temple of Doom, where Indy ends up having a female supporting character and a kid sidekick in this one, except the kid sidekick was with Wombat instead, and it was Teddy, and they end up being on side with Indy, trying to find the pieces of the dial. So they end up finding the first two pieces of the dial, and then they went back and they ended up finding this. Ended up going to like Syracuse, which is in Sicily, and they found the third and final piece of the dial. And one of the bad guys, of course, met his demise, and also Jorgen Voller had a couple of thugs with him, including this huge brute, which even Indy had a hard time fighting him too. And he ended up the brute meeting his demise by drowning after he was handcuffed too with Teddy. And so after Indy found the last piece of the dial, Jorgen ends up coming in and ends up shooting Indy, which is the 10th time that Indy got shot. And also during the time when Indy and Wombat were climbing, Indy was thinking about what happened before in his experience. He mentioned what happened during his past adventures. Like he said that he drank the blood of Kali, was taken over, under mind control, been tortured by voodoo. He got shot 9 times, including Wombat's dad, by accident. And he is also, which now became the 10th time when he got shot by Voller. And so yes, he even mentioned about his dad when he found that's his dad's watch. That's my dad's watch, and said. And then after they found the pieces of the dial, the third piece of the dial, they found a corpse that had a watch, which is odd, because watches were never invented during Archimedes' time period. So then they realized in the future what happened when they realized what happened in the past. When they realized the walls had a picture of a phoenix, and it had hieroglyphics on it, and it had propellers, which they weren't even a thing back then. And so Jorgen ends up taking Indy, and he thought he was going back to 1939, but then Indy realized they're going way back before 1939, which is 314 BC, I think. And the Romans thought that the plane are dragons, but Archimedes ends up finding the plane destroyed, and Indy ends up surviving the crash, and the bad guys met their demise. So they find themselves in a different time period. Indy was so shocked by that, but originally Indy had attempts to stay in it. One made attempt to suicide by staying in Archimedes' time period, but Wombat and Teddy refused to have him stay, so they ended up knocking him out. So after that, Indy wakes up back in his proper time period and ends up meeting up with Wombat and Sala and Teddy again. And surprise, surprise, they end up meeting Marion. Yes, Marion. Indiana ends up reconnecting with Marion one last time. Yes, that's right, folks. Being that this is the final film, they ended it with where Indy ends up reconnecting with his estranged ex-wife. Yeah, so they end up reconnecting their relationship and they ended up rekindling their relationship. They ended it with a reminiscent kiss. And there it is. And then it ends where Sallah and his grandchildren are off to get ice cream. And it shows the Indy's hat dangling on the clothespin one last time. And as before the screen goes black and close off of the circle, Indy grabs his hat. And there it ends. So what do I think about this, folks? Overall, it was a great film. Great to see Indiana Jones come back for one final adventure, and it went out with a bang. Now, folks, I recommend you go see that movie. It's such a great flick. It's such a great flick. And for people who are... And this is definitely better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I promise you, it's better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I mean, it did have some mixed reviews too, but it's a million times better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. They truly had redemption. They truly redeemed themselves after Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And being that it's the final Indiana Jones film, it went out with a bang. And that's all I have to say, folks. And as always, stay awesome, my Monster Masters. And I'll catch you later, and stay tuned for more content. And as always, and I'll see you next video, and I'll see you in the next video sometime, and as always, peace, man. Peace out, bros.